revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary. I am a revolutionary.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Where there's people, there is power. Justice in our time.
Good evening, everyone. Another episode of Equal Starts. And today we've got my co-director, Sally Ann Berris, and my right-hand man, a cousin, a seasoned permanent panelist now. He's on nearly every week. They'll do the part 3 of the violence against women and girls with the context of, the domestic abuse pilot scheme, my first one on Wednesday. And I'll have another 5 weeks. How did you think it went, Cuz?
Yeah, it was really good. It was really insightful. Yeah, I learned a lot, especially like the law aspect of it. So it's good to kind of open your ears and eyes to certain things that obviously you think you know because it's domestic abuse, but you don't know when it comes to the law aspect of it.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, you saw the picture, Sally, isn't it? Sally was giving me advice saying, "Oh, sure, they should have pads on when they're kicking." It's true. I thought Paulie would have brought that, and his daughter, since she's a taekwondo
champion,
to second belt, was it 2 black belts, second dan taekwondo champion, national champion as well. But
I'm quite powerful.
I'm hoping, just to demonstrate to the people that we not just talk about these problems, we try to resolve them in real life. With actual, services that are beneficial to all people, all parties. Yeah, that was the great thing I took from that on Wednesday, and hopefully it'll be even better this week coming. Have you seen the headlines around the further release of the Epstein documents? It seems to be going much deeper, the rabbit hole. I didn't realize it involves quite a lot of the world leaders as well, of different nations. I don't know how they're able to operate in that vacuum when there's a lot of women in politics now. It's shocking. You think the women are involved in the cover-up as well after all these years, not only now that this kind of information is coming out?
Well, I mean, if people are not professionally courageous enough to stand up and take action when they're in the position, then you're going to ask yourself, aren't you, what's stopping them? So, we can't sit back and just watch things from this outside position and say, okay, so, something's holding them back. They're in positions of power, some of these people. They do have political voices. They do have, and they should be professionally courageous. And if they're not, if people are not taking actions within their abilities, then you have to ask yourself why. I don't know. Somebody made a coach. There's a video on LinkedIn that's going around, and it looks to be a president and some other things with girls and stuff like that on LinkedIn. And it's I just said, I made a comment on there saying that unfortunately, due to AI, it's very difficult for us to now believe what we're seeing. Because AI has become so, you used to be able to look at people's lips. You could, there were signs, but now it's very difficult.
Real good, I know.
Yeah, now it's very difficult. And I made a comment about, unfortunately, it's very difficult for us to assess this now. And a few people jumped on that and said to me about being silent and et cetera. So I responded and just said, I'm not in a position of power. There are first-hand witnesses to this kind of abuse. There are people that have been interviewed, and there are people in positions of power that can investigate, interrogate, make arrests, make things public, emails, et cetera, and it's in their hands. But I mean, some of it is shocking. There's something very evil about it.
No, it is. To be fair, I always knew there was more to the rabbit hole, but I didn't realize it involved so many world leaders that are not even in America. So how far did these tendrils go? And then I saw there was some kind of, how could I say, not influencer, but some kind of public figure that came on LBC from America and saying that, oh, if you wasn't in the Epstein circle, you was a loser. It was an LBC I saw on social media today on Instagram. And I said, how can you say that as a woman? Where's the in-group preference? Where's the defending your fellow sister? As it's shocking. And the way she was so blasé with it, and you could see the presenter was cringing, but he didn't say anything to her when she said that. He was a loser if you wasn't on that list.
Crazy.
And then I said, no wonder why Ghislaine Maxwell was involved with all that as well. It's a travesty.
I mean, you've got to ask yourself about people's strength of character. Where's their strength of character that they can't allow themselves to be outside of that circle? You know, where's their ethics? Where's their values? What puts them in a position where they allow that? Because these are government leaders. Then we're not talking about Joe Public in the street. We're talking about major leaders, film industry, music industry, politicians, huge businessmen. You know, where is it that they couldn't say no to that or step outside of that? Where's the strength of character? It's just, it defies belief, doesn't it? I think so.
I think some of it as well is the political leverage in saying, listen, if I speak out because of what I've done, they'll throw me under the bus as well. So they think, oh, they're complicit in the silence. Because they all know that some of these people have been involved for over a decade. But because of the mudslinging, they're thinking, oh, maybe I can avoid it or swerve it. Some of the names on the list is even from my community. I was shocked. Oprah Winfrey.
There's been lots of like hints around her, unfortunately. Lots of hints, you know, from Ellen, loads of different. There's been lots of
Ellen DeGeneres. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, there's lots of markers to show that they're not conducting themselves well. I just don't. I think the greatest thing that's come out from this and the Palestinian thing is that we now see truth. It's very transparent now. You know, nobody can really say that it's not clear and real, and you know, you just got to wait for it to play out. I mean, I can't wait to see them paraded and locked up myself.
You think they will, the redacted parts, you think they'll ever get rid of the redaction? Because for Trump being the leader of the free world, he can pardon himself and can say, yeah, I'm not releasing the documents without the redactions on them. After he promised to say that he would release the files publicly for everyone to see.
I mean, you've got to reach a point where you say that these people are living in a delusional reality, because while they can tell themselves everything they tell themselves, the multitude of people now, you know, the billions of people across the world are seeing what it is. It is what it is. It's just who's going to make the stand and say, right, you're done. You're done, because there's no rescuing the US. There's no rescuing these countries unless steps are taken. That's it.
And then Peter Mandelson as well.
Well, it's a generational thing, isn't it? It goes down and down and down the line. Unless something's done, it will go down the line. No trust in politicians, no trust in the music industry, no trust in the film, no trust. So for me, I'm just sitting here waiting, thinking, okay, when's the cracks coming? Who's going to be held accountable first? Because there's no other choice to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
no. Eventually, there's got to be a reckoning, isn't there? There usually is. It's just sometimes it takes longer than usual. But you see, Peter Mandelson. To be fair, Keir Starmer has made him a sacrificial lamb. He knew what he was doing. I saw from when I was at university that he had links. He used to be in the tabloids in the papers. They had links to Epstein and the nightlife and going out there and holidaying on his yacht, and him and was it Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife. He was paying off her debts. So these things are known for over 15 years. So why is it only now that you're pillaging him and that you're releasing it at this time? So is it just to destabilize the government or the trust in Starmer? Yeah, we're knowing that most of them politicians were aware of his affiliations, because if I can find out of it from a newspaper report from like 2007, 2008, how can you not know that when you're in the corridors of power and you've made him the US ambassador, knowing that he had links beforehand, and you saying you didn't know how deep it went?
I think it's like watching global reality TV. I really do. It's like watching a global kind of series of reality TV around this alternative, I don't know, this alternative universe of what people think in leadership they can do. And I think we just have to say no. Just have to, these cracks have got to appear, and somebody's got to stand up and say no.
Do you not think Keir Starmer will survive? Because they're thinking about removing him and issuing a no confidence vote.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think anything will happen out of that? But I think he will be removed, but it'd be interesting to see what they do next after that.
Yeah, when they said reforms ahead in the polls. But they've got links to Trump as well, especially that Farage, isn't it? So I
Yeah.
don't know how that would unfold with the electorate. I don't know how that would unfold. But on the more local issues, in terms of the strategy that they're implementing, I don't know how they can have that, the violence against women and girls strategy, knowing that this scandal has been hanging over their head for the best part of 2 decades. So yeah, that in itself is mind-boggling, especially that Starmer was director of prosecutions when he was like a top lawyer for the whole country, like attorney general. So I don't know how that's going to be implemented now. I noticed there's no screaming from Women's Aid about it really. There's no one of the big feminist-centric charities speaking about it. So I said, well, this is something that you thought you would have got behind. I said, yeah, there needs to be total reform or revamping of government policy and government members. But they've stayed quiet on it. Is that because they're a charity, you think, Sally? Or you think it's because of the deals they're doing behind the scene, that who people that have maybe supported them are involved in it as well?
I mean, it's an illusion to say that they're a charity. They are a political player. They're a dynamic political player in governance, in policy, in the delivery of service, the management, fiscal management. The dominance of their activity is to shape services that are in the UK, and they also influence international services. So they go into lock themselves into whatever's going on in that environment, and they go into risk manage. That's what happens, isn't it?
And United Nations as well. United Nations, it has links even to that, and NGOs.
They influence states, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Italy, countries in Europe. They are, it's a global influencer. They're going to be extremely careful about how they speak, what they say, what they do. They're going to be very careful because they're stuck between governance in the UK and then having a voice for what's gone on. How do they do that? How do they manage that situation? I'm sure they're taking loads of advice and they're being very careful.
Oh, for like public relations experts and things like that.
Yeah, I think they'll be. I think they'll be very careful about how they position themselves.
Well, if they're so radical as they were with domestic abuse and the family court system and child maintenance service, you'd think, yes, this is something that said, look, there needs to be a total reform of power and how things are done in terms of politics and governance. It's down to the local authorities, as far as the government.
I think the only thing that you can work with now is truth. I think it's the only thing that anybody can work with. There are humanitarian rights in legislation that lead down from the UN. You don't need to have this negative, inequitable voice that says we can only support one gender, when all of the rights are in play that says we can support two. So why not work from a framework of truth? Why not present truth? Why not refresh your point of view and get the support of the communities on board by just being truthful about what's going on? You know, I mean, I have, after all of the years that I've worked in this sector and all of the meetings and the strategic stuff, all the stuff I've done over the years, I honestly don't think there's anything more you can do apart from promote that now, or go down with the ship.
Yeah, well, Jesus, it sounds like a lot of people are going down with the ship. I don't think there'll be anyone else to left to govern. You might have to make a return, Sally. You might have to, get involved, become the prime minister.
I don't think I'm too outspoken for that, Sean. I try and be careful what I say these days. I try and allow other young voices to come up. There's some incredible young women I noticed on social media now that have got very balanced outlooks on this. I can see there's grumblings of a new voice coming through. I have for about 2 years, but recently I've watched social media and I can see these younger women, maybe, like 30s, mid 30s, 20s, 30s, who are coming out with a very different narrative. So I'm kind of hoping that they will come in and say, no, we're not having that. That's why I say to you, it's a generational thing. I'm sure some things are left over. It's like a swinging ball, isn't it? It swings this way and then it swings that way and it keeps going back and forth. But there are some very balanced voices, some very young balanced, and I think you should pick up on that. I think, looking at what you're doing with Equal Start is maybe inviting some of those younger voices here.
Yeah, you have to tell me the handles. I've seen a couple from my community, but Elsie Cullen, I interviewed her the other day. Dr. Brenda Hayanga, but they don't really comment on the actual politics. It's more about research and community-driven change at the local level. I haven't seen any that really comment on what's going on in the high-end politics in terms of critique of what needs to be done to stop atrocities and things like this happening again. Maybe you know any of their handles?
I will send you some over. I mean, I think everybody has a voice at some point, and when one layer in society sees this narrative that's going on, it gives courage for them to have their voice. It's when you think that you're standing out there on your own. For some people, perhaps younger than me, that you get to a point where you think, "Nah, I just need to be. I have to live with this honesty." But for some people who are younger, or maybe they're feeling a bit dispersed, if you listen to one voice, there's some young women, there's some young, very vocal women out there now. I've also seen on LinkedIn some professional people, psychologists, psychotherapists, a couple of people that are working in journalism. These voices are becoming far more balanced. But if one sees one group, then the other sees the other group. I think,
and they connect. They connect.
They connect, and it does. We do have this collective consciousness. We do have this collective awareness. And when you can connect to other people in different jobs and roles and whatever, building that, women, Sean, are being lied to by women. Women are being lied to by other women. And I think if you bring that into the room and let people see the honesty that, from different sectors, you have a balanced perspective. You have.
It's true. If they're balanced perspective, the society would be better off. It won't be like setting up the gender wars, men against women, boys against girls. Disparity in services, equitable services anyway. And there won't be this scrambling for the cannon fodder and the chicken feed from the government's leftovers.
Well, I think my I don't know about you, but my perspective on this has always been to be in truth. I mean, one of the research parts that I did was I sat down and looked at the impact of a man or boy experiencing domestic abuse. And I looked at how many women are attached to that man or that boy. So, I looked at the statistics, 2.4 children for each home, etc., etc. And I counted how many women there were attached in the generational thing. So because it is, almost equal, one boy, one girl, that kind of thing. So counted how many women were experiencing the pain of seeing someone they love either living in an abusive relationship or experiencing some form of abuse. And you've got grandmother on both sides, aunt on both sides, mother, you've got sister, you've got female cousins, all in this generational living here and now. All of those women affected by it. You know, all that should in enough say, you know, it could be my brother, my father, my uncle, my cousin, my son. So why am I thinking this way? Why am I buying into this perspective? So there's things that can strip this down, and, you know, at least I would think switch somebody on to say, okay, let me look at this from a different perspective a minute. Let me see what this looks like. And I think some of what you are doing is amazing. And I do think that having that coming into a room would benefit.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's if they let me in those kind of rooms. You know, like you said, when you're outspoken and you're not smoozing as a critical friend, they're like, oh well, you know, you're too radical and there's troublemaker and we can't control the loose cannon. You know, you get all that, especially in the higher epic echelons from what I've seen. And
I
people
know, but you,
Mm.
in fairness, you have started breaking that down, because anybody that I know who gets to know you does a 360 on that perspective. When they get to know who you are, get to know your perspective, get to see that you're actually whole family, when they start, when when you break through that, they actually spin around on that. So
Yeah,
that's
I've
about,
found that quite often, but usually after
I,
many months or you know maybe a year and a half, 2 years,
yeah, but it's
depending
your
how often we
persistence.
interact.
It's your persistence, though. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
your job is to break down that barrier, and you succeed in it.
Funny
So,
enough, you say that. What I noticed when there's a more wholesale change, like you said, the 360 turnaround, is usually when I've mentioned that I volunteer for Women's Aid. And
well, I
obviously,
mean,
my
truth
own
is,
personal struggles with domestic abuse with the family, where I've had to stand up for my female family members. And then when I got arrested once for when I was younger, in my early 20s, for defending a partner from the abusive partner on the street. But then I told them, said, look, the lady said, oh, why do you get involved? It's none of your business. So I soon stopped that. I soon stopped that straight away because I said, look, I'm getting in trouble for trying to play hero. It's like I had a messiah complex watching too much He-Man when I was young. So once they've seen that, and obviously the work around 5 times more with the black women's maternal health and Asian women's maternal health, and that I went to the family courts a few years ago as well, protesting with Women's Days about having journalists submitted to the family courts and more scrutiny. Once they saw that was detailed before it got all popular in the media, that's when they're like, oh, we didn't know that. I said, yeah, you wouldn't know that. But to be fair, maybe I should have said that from early in my campaign and activism journey, quoting those facts, but I didn't want to go on like I was brownie point scoring, so you wouldn't really say anything.
I know, but don't you think that people need to see that there is balance there? Because otherwise we instantly, like, I work with women, people make a lot of assumptions about my work. And some women have approached me for coaching and stuff like that. And I can
I've
see
seen myself.
they tentatively will look at, and I can see it in them, and people have said to me, I put your name in Google, and I'm thinking, well, and then I have to say to them, okay, so what were your thoughts and feelings? So you have to remove that barrier.
It's true.
All of them, in the end of, not one is stuck by that, who is not attached to some form of extreme feminist perspective. They've come around and understood that, when they get to know you and understand you. I mean, Jason likes, he's got this thing around, he wants to be in a space where he knows that he's not going to have to battle this negativity, and yet he always steps up. Every time he seems to be always here and present.
Yeah, no, he is.
His
He's
voice,
interested in topics.
his voice is a good voice, though. He has a voice that's balanced. Getting to know both of you, people getting to understand your perspectives. That's key, because we need there. I mean, I know you're recording and things, but those voices are so important to hear. Men who can stand up and say this is wrong, and if you attack me, I'm going to say why this is wrong. Even if you drop the mic, You know, even if I used to, for the first few years that I used to do this, and I used to talk to guys, and I used to say to them, you know, at some point you've got to take responsibility for the fact that you, to some degree, you allow this to happen when you say nothing. When you say nothing, or you don't stand and say, actually, you know, if somebody's saying, oh, you know, toxic male, well, actually, you know, I'm a man and I speak to other men. And when we are considering these things, reflecting or sharing or talking about these things, your perspective of what I am thinking or feeling is actually not true. This is the way I think about that. This is the way I think about this. Drop your mic, walk away. Don't get in the argument. But don't leave there feeling that you don't have a voice, you
Yeah, I
know?
think it's a culture thing, Sally. With that, they're thinking, oh, I don't want to be labeled as we've spoken about in previous episodes, a misogynist, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, these male online influences from the red pill, black pilled fraternity, and they're thinking, oh, look, if I get tarnished with that brush, it's like you know, I'm on the same level as Jeffrey Epstein or Rolf Harris or Jimmy Savile, and they're thinking, you know what, I just don't want any of that kind of stink on my name or any hint of that kind of controversy, so they don't say much. They just try to stick to the, you know, the middle tightrope, the middle ground, which ends up
Well,
being no man's land, to be fair.
when you both have, when guys like you have a history that said something else in your past, then you have a foundation that you've already laid to say, actually, I've worked with Women's Aid, I support all families, I've supported women, but also I believe that I should be able to support young boys or men that are experiencing abuse, or, you know, I should be able to, this is my experience. Because otherwise, you know, where's that strength of courage? I know, I know it sounds awful. I know,
No,
I
no, no,
know.
that's proper. You do have to have it because when I started out, a lot of the men that used to support me, to be fair, I used to get from the beginning, I used to get for actually more female support. Said, yeah, we need more men stepping up, Sean. They're disappearing, they're not being present with their kids, they're running off. They don't want to be assertive. I said, yeah, but that's not what is the in thing at the moment in terms of the political narrative. But they said, look, they don't want to be call it out publicly because they don't want to be seen as a pick me, internalized misogyny. They have no in-group preference, all these kind of things. Then you had the men that said, Sean, maybe I'll work in HR or you know in a job where it's sensitive to these things and it's the ideology is feminist domination. So they're saying if I do that, I'd be slitting my own throat over my career, and I could be out of work and the sector I work in, I would never maybe have a job in the sector again. So this is like 5, 6 years ago, and to see we're encouraging that over the last, especially the last 2 years, that more people are vocal about it, and more women that used to be frightened and men are coming and say, yeah, it's not fair. It's gone too far now. The pendulum's swung too far to the left. We need to rebalance. But you still get the radical feminists saying, no, this is still a power deficit. We still don't have enough money. We still have too much responsibility at home in terms of child rearing. We're still the bigger victims, statistically bigger victims of domestic abuse and violence, and the outcomes are worse for us because men cry but women die and stuff like that. Then you got, you know, the former Women's Aid acolytes that are in government now, reading out the names, as you know, of every woman that's died at the hands of men since 2016. So that with it being in the legacy media all the time, people think, oh, it is men's fault then. You are leches, you are no good, you are sort of, and a lot of you stand by and don't even help us, the ones that don't agree. It's not all men, but yet the men that is not involved, they don't support us, which they should be to defend us from these kind of rogue elements. And I said, but you can't do that because there's people that do. Like, did you see that fella in America, in ICE, when he stopped the ICE agents arresting that lady? Is it Jim Adler? And he got shot. He got shot by the police. They killed him and said, look, they said, is she going to go and look after his family and our kids? Is she going to go and visit them and make sure they're okay because now they've lost their breadwinner? I said, and he wasn't like he was aggressive. He just tried to stand in front of it and knocked him to the ground. And when they cuffed him, he was shot. And they tried to say he pulled a gun on them, even though you can see there's cameras there. I don't know why they would even try to attempt to say that. I said, and there's another a man called Amin Khalud. Last year, he got life-changing injuries trying to defend a lady on the street. He got punched. His head hit the curb, brain damage. And they said, apart from when the cameras were there, they said, no, thank you for saving me. He said, I don't think she's looking after his family, going to visit or supporting him in his serious injury. So I said, you see why men are now reluctant to get involved like that. He said, it's not as plain as that, as, oh, men should be the good men or the men that say they're good should be standing up for us and bringing these other men to heel. Said it doesn't always work like that. Just like you don't get women that don't always, pull up women for when they're showing lack of accountability and making false allegations and they're perpetrators of domestic abuse. No one really says anything because the historical injustice, they say, well, you know what, they deserve it. For all the years we couldn't vote, couldn't get bank accounts. We were seen as chattel. We were traded for marriage to heal the, political feuds and things like that and aristocratic feuds. So this is the reward. This is your payback. The chicken's coming home to roost. So you got all that mixed in with the personal trauma of maybe what they've been through in their own lives, warping their perspective.
I get it. I understand. I genuinely get it. I mean, the position I have in where I am right now is just about being kind, being thoughtful, not being scared, not being afraid. If you see something that's not right, then say this is not right. In whatever shape you were in, whether it's your profession or whether it's, you're walking down the street. My thing is about, you don't have to go in there with guns blazing or, this big dramatic act of whatever, but saying, I don't accept that. And I'm here right now and I am the witness. And then therefore I need to do something to say this is not right, whatever that is. To be personally responsible, to be professionally responsible, to have that. I mean, for me, that's the one thing. I can't let go of that no matter what. I just can't. That's my integrity. That's your integrity, Sean. It's Jason's integrity. If we can't be present in whatever we're witnessing and be that, that voice that says, no, I don't accept this. And I think the likes of violence against women and girls, if you know the truth and you know the evidence and you know that less than 1% of funding goes to men, where statistically at the moment the figures are still around a third. I know there are new figures coming out now that are leaning more towards that being 50-50, but even if you accept this, what statutory figures are, then there is still less than 1% of funding going to men, even though a third of them is statistically recorded as being experiencing the same thing. There is no, we can't get away from this. This is the reality, isn't it? I mean,
yes, there is.
Over the last, I would say 6 to 8 months, I know that there are 3 major support groups across the UK, male support groups that help with things like suicide prevention, lots of other things, that have closed down with a lack of funding. They've got no funding, no support, no funding. This is not right. This is very wrong. So we have to find that way. I do think that the voices that are in the community who are isolated should be brought together somehow.
Yeah, I think so as well. I've been trying to do that behind the scenes, uniting. Funny enough, I spoke to, where I had the daddy-daughter day with my daughter last year in November. That group there, the Bridging the Gap.
Okay.
They're funded by the Violence Reduction Unit in the Mayor's office. So they're doing, in combination with the church, about doing fathers groups, about the mental health, checking in, making sure they're present with their children, biblical principles based on. And they've got some kind of organization. I was broaching with them this week, said maybe we should have a consortium, because I said I know Father to Father and Father Figure and a few other kind of community interest companies around that, kind of young boys, teaching them to be respectful of women and making sure they're stable emotionally, they're not erratic and too temperamental. And they've got something, a consortium in North London. They said we should have one in South London. And he's like, oh, we've got to check the values. I said, no, I'm all for that. He said, because he said, oh, we've got to be careful because of what we're doing. I said, no. I said, I'm not expecting you to just support anything off the back. But in terms of the synergy, there's a lot of similarities more than there are differences. So I said, we should have something like that around here that way. And then maybe one day we'll have one in the West as well. So it make it easier to when we're trying to group and hold our collective strength in a way that we can actually bring around real influence instead of working in silos. And you may have a little project here, I might have a tiny micro project here, and then we're working when it should be an overall strategy to make sure we make better conditions, especially funding and services for men and boys. But I can still see like, oh, well, I support anything you're doing, but in terms of lobbying and politics, we're not really Salford. I said, yeah, you don't have to be involved in politics, but said you're getting money from the mayor's office. That is a political entity. And I said, and I'm just talking about maybe showcasing what you do with the all parliamentary party groups. They're like the men and fathers, and men and boys one, and then there's a fathers one.
They're worried about getting their money cut. They're worried about the outcomes from that. They're worried about not getting the support for supporting men if they go too close to what is not a politically friendly subject, which in itself is very wrong. You know, I mean,
but if we self-resource, Sally, we wouldn't have to worry about that. Self-resourcing is a big thing.
Well, I get it and I understand that, but I think there is a responsibility for governance when, if it's 33.3% of victims of domestic abuse are men, how can you justify less than 1% being spent?
Yeah, of course you can't.
And for any of you, and any of the audience that steps in and say, oh, this money's being given, this money being given, the money that is being spent, most of that money is working on how men should be educated in not causing harm or growing into better men.
Basically, indoctrination.
That doesn't help victims of domestic abuse or sexual abuse or anything like that. So, I think you should put an advert out there, Sean, to get some young ladies or some mothers or grandmothers on the show